Have you watched a Legends of Runeterra tournament lately? If you have, you might recognize my face. My name is Boulevard, welcome to Tournament Tactician, and I am going to try and help you navigate through this buck wild tournament meta that we have found ourselves in here in patch 1.4. Now there's a couple of problems with this. First and foremost, let me get this out of the way. This is the most diverse format that we've seen in a while for tournaments, and it's a very personable meta, and I'll get into that a little bit later about how the standard lineup has kind of fallen to the wayside ideologically, and we're seeing a lot of lineups come out that are targeting one deck that you can see across multiple lineups and how that's going to play into this. So not only is this meta already all over the place, the format that the tournament organizers have been discussing throughout patch 1.4 has been all over the place as well. It seems as though, for the most part, we have finally settled on region-locked best-of-3 one-ban conquest for Swiss, going to a no-ban best-of-5 for Top Cut. Now, the problem with that is this last weekend's major tournament is going to be BR Fest number 3, which runs in a unified format as opposed to region locked. So take all of that customization that I had previously mentioned we're seeing all over the tournament meta and throw in the extra layer of creativity given by the unified format, no card overlap as opposed to region locked. And we've got a recipe for disaster when it comes to me trying to help you prepare for this. We also have patch 1.6 coming next week, which has promised by Riot to have quite a few nerfs in it. So this last weekend is going to get absolutely crazy, and there is only so much I can try to do to prepare you. So I'm just going to talk you through the knowledge that I have accumulated over the last 3 weeks of the format and try to help you get as best a representation as you can going into the week. And please understand that since this is the first unified tournament of the meta, I'm going to get some stuff wrong, and you're going to have to use your own brain a lot more than you have in any previous week. So buckle in. This is going to be an interesting one. But first things first, it's important for me to tell you guys when I was right and wrong, so we're going to take a look back at what I said last week in terms of standard lineups and kind of check how that lined up with what actually happened. So first of all, I said that the standard lineup was going to continue to be Karma Ezreal, Brahma Nivea, and Scouts. That was wrong. Brahma Nivea has completely fallen off the face of the planet. Then I said the second most played lineup on the weekend was going to be Karma Ezreal, Darius Harrowing, and Misfortune Scouts. This actually ended up being the most played lineup over the course of the weekend across top cuts from all the tournaments that we saw, although not by a very large margin. It was something around 30%, maybe less of the meta, which is not a lot for the most represented region across top cuts compared to previous patches. And I had mentioned that for the standard sort of aggro lineup, we would see Zed Elusives, Darius Harrowing, and Misfortune Scouts, which technically I guess is correct. Ghoster Driver did win Duels of Runeterra 12 with this, as well as the Maverick tournament the week before, so I'm willing to call that one a win. So now I'm going to show you some of the popular decks that may have popped up last weekend that you might have missed that slipped under your radar, as well as update you on what some of these standard decks in the format look like if things have changed drastically within them. First of all, Lucian and Misfortune are still together, though Lucian has been seeing some other people on the side, including Callista and Zed. Now, the Zed version is popping up both as Demacia, Elusives, and Bannerman, though the Bannerman version is more popular, similar to how the Bannerman version of Misfortune is more popular than Scouts currently. We saw Lucian Callista both as a Shadow Isle Allegiance and a Demacia Allegiance deck over the course of Duels of Runeterra 12, though the Bannerman version seems to be the one that's here to stay, being run by both Winding God in that tournament and Casanova in Twitch Rivals. Realistically, it feels like the tempo style of Bannerman is still a thing in the past, and as long as you have 3 Bannerman and 3 Relentless Pursuit in your deck, you can take wins out regardless of what little extra splash you have in there. Zed is a little more aggro, Callista is a little more mid-range, but also provides a nice 3-attack blocker, and Misfortune provides an alternate backline win condition. It definitely feels like this is made from your leftover lineup though, not necessarily what you should be basing your lineup around your Bannerman slot. We've only had one tournament weekend since the nerf to Pilfered Goods, but because we've had so many different tournaments spread out from Friday after the nerf all the way up through Wednesday of this week with Twitch Rivals, we've seen all 3 Pilfer variants make a comeback, that being TF Swain, TF Ezreal, and Misfortune Sejuani, only for Sejuani to seemingly come back out on top, though the deck has completely cut Pilfered Goods and has shifted to a nearly all-unit variant, though it kept the black market merchants in. It still plays that tempo style that we see out of old Bannerman, though it's a little more consistent versus some of the aggro decks, as Jagged Butcher is the cleanest way to contest the early 3 health units, and off-turn Sejuani is probably the best answer for a Harrowing outside of Deny, especially given that a Nivea has fallen off, meaning all Harrowings coming out are from a Darius deck. Braum Lux has been quietly picking up in popularity, which rounds out our lineup nicely in a few ways. If you're playing Karma Ezreal and Darrowing, then you're left with Bilgewater, Demacia, and Freljord. This previously left you with either Misfortune Bannerman or Pilfer, which are not too far off of each other in terms of playstyle. So if you're looking for a more unique deck to round out this lineup, Braum Lux has been performing admirably across a number of regions, and as I'll get into a little bit later, this could be a big advantage as we've seen a lot of anti-meta lineups popping up over the course of patch 1.5. And then there's this deck that Swim brought to Twitch Rivals and won Pool A with, and this is a good segue into the anti-meta lineups that we've been seeing. In previous tournament formats, your 3-deck lineup was just the 3 most broken decks slapped together. For quite some time, that was Bannerman, Endure Spiders, and Heimer Vi. 3 decks that all played differently enough that you have a good chance at beating any lineup because your decks are all very powerful. We saw a similar meta in patch 1.2. But this time the regional composition did play into things a little bit more. Heimer Vi, Sea Monsters, and Frostbite Control weren't the 3 most overpowered decks in the format, but they fit together the best in a tournament lineup and gave you the strongest spread. Endure Spiders was good, but pigeonholed you into some kind of Bannerman for the 3rd deck. Pilfer was good, but took Shadow Isle all but off the table for you, which was one of the most powerful regions. I'm oversimplifying a little bit here, but the point was a lot of decks felt like they pigeonholed you into certain lineups if you were going to have a shot at not only beating the best lineup, but the rest of the people who brought an atypical lineup like you. In patch 1.5, the chinks in the armor of Piltovers on Ionia are on full display, at least for tournaments, and on top of that, most regional combinations have some kind of tier 1 or 2 deck available to them. This means that a lot of powerful decks are being slotted across multiple lineups, and rather than one deck forcing your hand, you're free to mix and match as you choose. This has led the tournament meta to a point where you can identify a deck that is being flexed across multiple lineups, most notably Karma Ezreal, Darrowing, and Bannerman. Not only do these decks in their own right make up a powerful lineup, but they're diverse enough in playstyle and regional combinations that you can flex them into strategy-specific lineups or anti-meta lineups. For example, Darrowing fits well into aggro lineups and lineups looking specifically to pick on Karma Ezreal. And we're at a point where we see players finding success with lineups that look to pick on any one of these decks or a deck with a similar strategy to them. We saw high in Duels of Runeterra Southeast Asia, top 8 with Karma Lux, Karina Control, and Braum Swain, a lineup made to pick on the Bannerman decks. We saw Ghoster Driver win Europe's Duels of Runeterra with Darrowing, Kinko Elusives, and Scouts, a lineup made to pick on Karma Ezreal. And we saw Swim win his Twitch Rivals group with Braum Swain, Karma Ezreal, and not Sea Monsters, a lineup he appeared to have brought to pick on the Darrowing deck. Which of course leads me to the logical conclusion that Braum Swain is the best deck in the format, because even though it wasn't specifically in Ghoster Driver's lineup, it was the most popular deck at Jamfest 7 and other 2-deck no-ban formats because it has a good Karma Ezreal matchup and a good spread of matchups as a whole. But alas, we play Conquest, not Conqueror, which is the format where you play a deck until you lose with it. But I do want to say, Braum Swain's probably, I would go as far to say it's a good deck. I like it. And the presence of these anti-meta lineups give more power to players just bringing whatever deck they want, especially if you don't bring any of those 3 decks we've seen get picked on. But the point is that customization and running whatever you want is sort of at its peak right now. Especially with the unified format being played this weekend, things are going to get crazy. Ghoster Driver has won 2 back-to-back European tournaments with an all-Allegiance lineup, and in general we're seeing a lot of Allegiance decks. Unified opens up the possibility of Allegiance and the off-region being paired in the same lineup. This is mostly a good thing for lovers of Shadow Isle and Freljord, who we most often see as splashed regions. Unfortunately, there's too much overlap on Noxus decks of just about every kind for you to somehow jam in both Darrowing and Braum Swain, but lineups like Darrowing and Sea Monsters open up, Braum Swain and Pilfer, and for the most part gives your lineup a little bit of extra oomph and a little less predictability, which is terrifying for people trying to come in with a counter lineup. Overall, there's usually not an insane amount of deviation between the unified and region-locked formats, though if anything, I would imagine you'll see less scouts, similar to how on patch 1.2 we would see more Pilfer over the scout deck, and the same may be true here if history is to repeat itself. And now you have reached the end of the video. You can turn it off here, or you can listen to me plug myself a little bit more. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter. It's from the BLVD. That's where you're going to find out where I'm casting and when I'm casting all over the course of the weekend, as these things do change. Down in the description below, I do have my constantly updating tournament tier list that is going to, take that one with a grain of salt, since we are doing a unified format this weekend. And earlier when I said, Bromp, Swain, and Pilfer have overlap, I don't know if you can do that because Fury of the North is so important to both of those decks, which is one of those things you don't think of while shooting, but I did want to clarify that. That's why that graphic kind of popped up there. It's one of those things that happens in post, but I do not want to reshoot. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and sincerely, good luck in your tournaments this weekend.